Peterson, this is me, Natalie, and I'm recording this video on behalf of our father, Suleiman Khalil, the former mayor of town of Sadat. On 8 February 2025, armed security officials came to our home in Sadat and they searched our whole house. Hello, Mr. Peterson, this is me, Natalie, and I'm recording this video.
All right, good morning. The side event is on human rights in the Syrian Arab Republic. Thank you all so much for taking the time to join us for this urgent conversation today about the safety of religious minorities in Syria. My name is Abi McDougal. I'm with Christian Solidarity International, CSI. We're the NGO hosting this event, and we're grateful to the European Center for Law and Justice for co-sponsoring this with us today. Before we begin, we will ask that you not take any photos or make any recordings of this event. The only two people who should be taking pictures are the gentleman in the suit in the back and the lady standing in the blue blouse, in the navy blue. They're with CSI, they're authorized to do so, but other than them, please refrain from pictures or recordings. However, the live stream is being recorded, so you will be able to view this afterwards online. And as a note for you to be aware, that also means that the full session, including the Q&A at the end, is being recorded and it will be publicly available online afterwards. So we have a fantastic panel today, and we're really grateful to have each person here with us. But before I introduce them, I want to start from the outset by addressing something that many of you have probably noticed, which is that there are no Syrian voices on our panel today. We worked really intentionally to make sure that we would have at least one Syrian voice of someone directly affected and impacted, of a Syrian minority, speaking at this event. That matters. And so we invited 8 different people, but repeatedly the response that we heard was that it simply felt too unsafe to speak on the record right now, either because they themselves are based in Syria or because they have family in Syria. And so I want to underscore that this is a really marked shift from the tone of excitement that we were hearing back in December and January. And for us, that reaffirms the importance of having this event right now. So we are, however, incredibly fortunate that we have experts on the situation in Syria speaking here today. First, on my left is Fabrice Balanche. He is an assistant professor of geography at the University of Lyon too, and is widely recognized as one of the most knowledgeable foreign experts on Syria. And so among many other academic posts, he served as the director of the Urban Observatory of the Near East at the IFPO, the French Institute of the Near East. Since the 1990s, he's spent 10 years between Syria and Lebanon, and he has collaborated on several humanitarian projects in Syria, including for Doctors Without Borders and the Mines Advisory Group. Last year, he received the Geopolitical Book Prize for his publication in French of The Lessons of the Syrian Crisis. Joining us remotely will be Joshua Landis. He's the Sandra Mackey Chair and Director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. He has received 3 Fulbright grants to support his research in Syria and won numerous prizes for his teaching. He's past president of the Syrian Studies Association, and he lived 15 years in the Middle East, with 4 of those in Syria. Joel Veldkamp, right here, further down, is the Director of Public Advocacy for Christian Solidarity International. He holds a Ph.D. in history from the Graduate Institute here in Geneva for a doctoral dissertation written about the Christians of Aleppo during the French Mandate. He lived and worked in Syria during 2010 and 2011, and he's also the editor of the Syrian Studies Association Bulletin. So to start us off, as I may have mentioned, I would like to read 2 letters from some long-standing contacts of CSIs in Syria who requested to remain anonymous because of safety concerns. And I'm reading the translations into English. So here's an excerpt from the first letter. Participation in public affairs is almost non-existent, and any independent political activity or criticism of authority is seen as punishable. The security services continue to have near absolute powers without effective legal or judicial accountability, leading to rampant human rights violations, especially in detention centers and areas under the influence of various conflicting forces. He ends by saying, "I do not want to portray the reality as bleak. as there are some positive initiatives, attempts to improve the economy, attempts to control individual violations, attempts to control security, the authorities listening to the people's complaints, the few civil initiatives so far, and others. To be sure, there are complications in the Syrian scene, and solutions certainly do not come easily. But I believe that acknowledging reality and insisting on defending human dignity and human rights is the first step towards change. Therefore, we hope that the United Nations and its specialized institutions will continue their moral and professional commitment to supporting just and comprehensive peace initiatives and reconciliation initiatives among the Syrian people. So it's for this reason that we're here today. And I'm going to go on to read an excerpt from the second letter, going into some specific concerns in brief. This sender says, if the new leaders have adopted, since taking power, moderate positions, they are, however, not followed by their troops on the ground, who have remained on their extremist Islamist position. For them, all those who are not Sunni Muslims, Shiites, Druze, Alawites, Christians, are infidels. Here, and hence, the abuses committed on a daily basis, of which here are a few examples. Summary execution or kidnapping, followed by liquidation of persons suspected, sometimes wrongly, of being sympathizers of the former regime. Armed groups who want to take law into their own hands without waiting for the establishment of pseudo-transitional justice. We are living a justice of revenge rather than a justice of reconciliation. Although not officially proclaimed, the Islamization of the country is underway through daily alterations, quote, to the customs and rights of individuals. So we thank you for being here, and we are going to turn the mic over to Fabrice.
How we can put it. Thank you very much. So in just 15 minutes, I try to provide a comprehensive overview of the Alawite Druze and Christian in Syria. It's built upon 35 years of study in Syria and a recent research trip to Damascus, Aleppo, Latakia, Tartus, and Qamishli, as well as information that I get from my extensive network of contacts in the country. The experiences of minority vary widely. First, because as you can see on this map, Syria is still a very divided country. The new government controls half of the country, but northeastern Syria is still under the control of the Syrian Democratic Forces. And in north, you have also pro-Turkish people. And as you can see in pink, the Jebel Druze in the south is still under the control of Druze militia. So you have this. We have to take in mind that the situation for the minorities is different because first of this division of the country. So I apologize if I simplify this complex issue in my short presentation. I will start with the Alawites. The Alawites who are concentrated in the coastal area, as you can see on this map, it's a yellow place, and we have also Alawite population in central Syria around Homs and Hama, and of course a huge community in Damascus. The Alawites about 10% of the Syrian population. They are the minority group from which the Assad clan originated. They have held power through political patronage, securing jobs in the army, intelligence service, and administration during decades. I did an informal survey for my PhD research in the 90s, and I understood that at that time, 80% of the Alawite worked for the state, compared to 30% for the Syrian population. So since December 2024, many Alawites have, of course, lost their job, pension, promotion due to the regime change. Humiliation has been a daily occurrence since the beginning. In January 2025, I was visiting Damascus, especially the area of Mezze Sittot Menin. It's an Alawite neighborhood in Damascus. And I saw fighters belonging to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham force Alawite resident, to walk on a picture of Bashar al-Assad to prove their loyalty to the new regime, of course, and to humiliate them. Today, the number of female crime and abduction is on the rise, yet there is no public outcry. The community is powerless as women are easy targets. When a woman is abducted, the extended family or the neighborhood usually try to take weapons and to protect the people. However, today they cannot do it because the threat of brutal retaliation, as it was the case last March. The desire for vengeance against the previous regime and animosity toward Alawite religion is very present in Syria today. The perpetrators of crime and kidnapping rely on the writing of the 14th century Syrian cleric Ibn Taymiyyah, who called for the eradication of the Alawites as heretics. And this was a clear motivation for the March massacre. We have to remember that the violence started in Latakia on March 4 and not in March 6, as most of the media and the official agency told. The massacre started in Latakia in the area of Datur. The neighborhood was surrounded, and it was the beginning of this bloody week. The fighting continued after March 9, albeit with lower intensity, and officially you have about 2,000 people who have been killed, but according to different sources, it's close to 5,000. I made a map of the massacre, as you can see on this map. It shows that the northern part of the coastal plain between Banyas, Latakia had the highest number of casualties. The city of Banyas was the site of a tragic massacre in Al-Qusur with more than 315 deaths. The majority of the people who have been killed in Banyas. On the road to Aleppo, you have two villages, Al-Muqtakhiyeh and Brashbo, which are located near the Aleppo-Latakia highway, who also experienced heavy casualties. At the south of Latakia, it's a village of Snowbar, who also suffered a lot with more than 150 people who have been killed. You have been also a massacre close to Masyaf. It's an Alawite Ismaili Christian city, killing 88 people in Rasafa. Also horrific acts perpetrated in Rab plain between Tel Salhab and Shathab. This place is extremely susceptible due to the proximity to Sunni majority Syria, where state brutality intervene with local desire for Alawite lands. In contrast, there have been fewer casualties in southern Alawite mountain, particularly in the district of Tartus, Safita, Drekish, and Shirbader, because these villages, the south area of Latakia, of the Alawite area, was not very involved with the regime at the time of the Ba'ath Party. But what we can see on this map, it's the massacre were not in isolated area. The massacre were close to the highway, close to the biggest city, inside the biggest city. That does it mean where the new government have police station. So he cannot ignore what's happened. If he didn't participate directly, as he pretended, he could prevent the massacre. So he let groups operate. He let the groups kill the Alawites. And when he pretended that the massacre started on March 6, because it was an Alawite appraising an Alawite, the former regime who tried to retake the power, it was not true, because I told you the massacre started on March 4 in Latakia. In March 5, it's the village of Dalie, which is a holy place for the Alawite, who have been targeted by helicopter. Dalie, it's not like Kardaha. It's not a place where the former regime was present. It's religious people who are in this village, and I know that there was nearly no military or intelligence service coming from Dalie. So it was a direct target on the religious, on the Alawite religion. So in March 6, when the Alawites saw fighter coming from Damascus, from Aleppo, from Hama, of course they resisted, and they started to kill people from the new government, and it was a justification for this horrible massacre. The new Islamist authority violence was indiscriminated. They killed women, children, elderly, young men were the main targets. This wasn't because they had been part of the previous regime army or secret service, but just because the Alawite community had to be eliminated. Now, Alawite men are aware that they may be executed for their religion, so they have to leave. And a few weeks ago, you have two young men in Homs who have been assassinated because they belong to the Merchedite community, which is a part of the Alawite community. So you can see the demonstration protesting against this massacre. The women and the young men have no other choice to leave the country if they want to survive. So they try to move to Lebanon, to Iraq, and then to join Iraq. The women and the children will join them later. This massacre are mainly motivated by ethnic cleansing against the community accused of complicity with the Assad regime, as well as religious hatred. The Christians, for the moment, are a little bit protected because they are just 200,000, 300,000 now in Syria, but especially, so they are not afraid. The community is old, the majority is up to 50, 60, because most of the young people are outside. The Christians were 5% of the population before the war, 1.2 million, and now they are just 1 million and ready to move, especially after the last bombing in the church in Damascus. Why they are protected? Just because the new regime know that the West take care about the Christian, and if he wants a lifting of sanction, he has to protect the Christian. Otherwise, they are subject to increasing Islamist pressure. You have religious figures who move to the Christian neighborhood and they try to convince them to convert to Islam. One of them was expelled from the Douala district in Damascus. Douala district, it's the southeast of Damascus. And it's in this area that you had the bombing on June 22. Probably it was a retaliation because the Christian population of the neighborhood expelled this religious man who wanted to convert them to Islam. And so we have to remember that in Baghdad in 2010, you had the same bombing in Sayyidat al-Najat, the cathedral, the Christian cathedral of Baghdad, and it was the signal for the departure of most of the Christian community from Baghdad and from Iraq. So, in conclusion, I can tell that you that discrimination and hostility toward non-Muslim, non-Sunni Muslim in Syria are evident. Shia and Alawite are the primary target of the Islamist hatred, and they are subject to ethnic cleansing. Usually, the religious and political justification hide also a clear material interest. What does it mean? Seizing the properties of the minority who were forced to leave. Thank you for your attention. That's fine.
Thank you so much, Fabrice, for that examination. We're going to turn over the mic now to Joshua Landis, who is joining us online.
Can you hear me? Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I hope I've been unmuted. Let me know. Give me a signal if I've been unmuted. Yes. Okay. I've got the signal. Thank you.
You may need to put on your headphones if you're listening.
It is a great pleasure to be talking to you today about the situation in Syria. Let me jump in and immediately say that I would like to begin talking about my wife's family and what happened to them during this period of massacres and after. Secondly, I'll talk to you about the constitution in Syria, the new constitution, interim constitution, which is highly discriminatory against the Alawites and other minorities, or particularly the heterodox Shiite minorities, such as the Druze, the Alawites, Ismailis. And then I would like to give you a little bit of context for why this ideology amongst the Salafi jihadists who've come to power is going to be very difficult to overcome, despite the kind words of the president towards in his efforts to say that all Syrians will be treated equally. So let me begin first with a few anecdotes about my own family, my wife's family, Pashur family that comes from the mountains, Alawite mountains, my wife is from Latakia, but the family is spread along the coast. 3 of her cousins were on the 6th, 7th, and 8th, had their houses broken into. Men demanded to know if they were Alawites. They were too frightened to lie and figured that if they'd lied, bad things would happen. So they said they were. And immediately they were told to give everything over to them, their cell phones, their money, their wallets, the keys to their cars were stolen, the houses were turned upside down. One cousin had her son, who grew up with my son, Haidar, who is about 23, never served in the military because he was a single son, and only sons do not have to serve in the military, was dragged out of the house and shot at the doorstep in front of his mother. He was the only breadwinner in the family, as the father had already died. And this traumatized, of course, everybody in the family who are speaking with each other, because they realized they were no longer safe in Syria, and that the words of the government that they would be protected were not serious. My brother-in-law, Firas, who was up in his father's village in order to trim some fruit trees and take care of some business there, met these militias only a week later, because after carrying out massacres on the coast, they went up to the villages in the mountains. So the massacre did not end after 3 days or 4 days along the coast. And we have a wonderful report that came out yesterday by a reporter for Reuters, a big investigative report, that proves that over 1,500 Alawites were killed in these massacres on the coast, and that very top government officials were okaying this. The spokesperson for the Ministry of Defense, when asked and told by members of the military on the coast that terrible infractions of the law were taking place, he said, God bless them, in one of his telegram emails. Any rate, my brother-in-law was in his village. Soldiers came to the village, which is above Banyas, and the 6 villages that surround his village. Everybody in these villages, nobody had guns. Everybody fled into the fields in order to hide. The soldiers used a drone in order to try to search for them. And when 2 of his neighbors left their hiding place prematurely, they were shot and killed. And the soldiers then mercifully went away. And after 2 days of hiding behind a rock, he finally came out. He was terrified to get into a car in order to try to go back to his family in Latakia. But eventually we arranged for him a safe travel, and he fled the country with his wife, Christian wife, and his kids immediately as he could, a guarantee that he could get out of the country safely. But he was terrified to get into a car. The Alawites were not leaving their homes because well over 50 Alawite girls, for example, have been kidnapped. And there's been a very good investigation by Reuters, once again, who's been working on this for several months to document how many of these Alawite girls have been kidnapped and sold into or trafficked. Some of them have been married by men in Idlib, and their parents are desperate to get them back, but of course are terrified to speak to the press because they've been threatened that if they do go to the press, their daughters will be killed. Now, let me just jump from these anecdotes to the new Syrian constitution, which I believe is very important. Because the new Syrian constitution in Article 3 talks about religion. Now, first of all, it gives all the power to the president. There is nothing democratic. There's no division of powers, despite some happy words in the beginning of this new interim constitution. It, in fact, establishes an authoritarian presidential system. There's no prime minister. There are no meaningful checks on Ahmed al-Shara, the new president. The president appoints 1/3 of the members of parliament, and he appoints a high committee that will then appoint the other 2/3. So all of the parliamentarians are supposed to be appointed by the president. The president serves as the head of the armed forces. He names 1 or more vice presidents, which have not been named yet. All the ministers are named by him. They're not responsible to the parliament. They're responsible directly to him. And he appoints all the members of the Supreme Constitutional Court. He can issue executive orders, propose legislation, and he declare emergency law. So he has all the power. And he has brought into the main ministries the people closest to him, who were in Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and this militia that brought him to power that had previously been a branch of al-Qaeda. And they share an ideology of Sunni supremacy, and an ideology which declares the Alawites, the Ismailis, the Druze, who make up at least 15% of this, all these Shiite minorities make up over 15% of the Syrian population. And they declare them not only to be unbelievers, kuffar, but they are murtadin. They are people who have known Islam and have intentionally left it. Therefore, they're apostates. And Article 3, which deals with religion in this new interim constitution, says not only that the president of the republic must be a Muslim, but that Islamic jurisprudence should be the principal source of legislation. That means Sharia law. And it does say that freedom of belief is protected, but then it goes on immediately to say that the state respects all divine religions. divine religions is Adyan al-Samawiyya. And it's important to understand that Salafi Muslims do not consider the Alawites, the Ismailis, and the Druze to have divine religions. They say that they are, that they're not, that they're mu'tadin, they've gone beyond the bounds of religion, and they do not have, their religions were not descended from heaven. In the 9th grade, now to understand how the meaning of this, let me just read you a teeny bit from the 9th grade school book on Islam. Now, it must be said that Bashar al-Assad, in the last days of the revolution, eliminated this paragraph that I'm going to read to you. But for 50 years, over 50 years, it was a staple of education in the 9th grade. And every Syrian student had to memorize, Muslim student had to memorize this, or had to learn from it and read it. And in the 9th grade textbook, it says, Islam fights paganism and atheism. It explains that those who worship something other than God are pagans, and that atheists are those who deny the existence of God. And it says that Islam must fight these two belief systems, paganism and atheism, because they are an assault to both instinct and truth. We are told that these belief systems contradict the principle of freedom of belief. Why is that? This is because Islam, it says, quote unquote, gives freedom of belief only within the limits of the divine religions, the divine path, which means a religion descended from heaven. Nazal min al-sama. And pagan religions, like Alawite religion and Druze religion, are not revealed by God. They are considered an inferior form of belief that reflects an animal consciousness. And then it says, how should Muslims deal with these people? And it must be underlined that this is half of humanity, of course, because this includes Buddhists and Hindus and so forth. Students are instructed that Islam accepts only two choices for pagans, that they are converted to Islam or killed. And every Syrian has learned this. Every Syrian Muslim has learned this. And that makes it particularly difficult because these soldiers that are being sent out to discipline the Alawites have an extremely prejudicial view of them, as well as most of the people in the defense forces. Now let me wrap up by saying that Ibn Taymiyyah, who is the great 14th century scholar, who published extensively on the Alawites and the Druze and other minorities, Christians as well as Shiites, and proclaimed fatwas that said that the Alawites, that demuhun wa malahun halal, that their blood and their property is halal. It can be shed and their property can be taken, and it's okay for Muslims to do that. His fatwas were banned under the Assads for the obvious reasons. But under this new regime, they have been published anew, and we have videos of authorities in Idlib saying that they have published many copies of his fatwas, and they are sending them for free to every master's and Ph.D. student from Sharia law graduates. So once again, this philosophy that proclaims that Alawites and Druze and other minorities are beyond the bounds, that they have to be killed, that their blood can be shed, is once again being not only read, but being pushed by Syria's authorities. And that makes it extremely difficult for Alawites to be reintegrated into society and to be accepted as equals You know, I could go on further about how deeply ingrained this philosophy is amongst the Muslim brothers. A leading Muslim brother, Sayyid Hawa, who during the 70s and 80s proclaimed that the Alawites were murtadeen and that they had to be fought as well. So this is not something that just goes back to the 14th century. It's something that's being repeated over and over again by authorities today. And that makes it very incumbent on the UN and Western authorities to hold the government to account in order to stop this kind of discriminatory behavior. Because in the last 2 months, as many Syrians have fled Syria, over 100,000, according to UN reports, have fled Syria as Syrians who have returned to Syria from Lebanon. This is just from Lebanon where these can be done. But 100,000 Syrians have fled to Lebanon. And my family, members of my family, are amongst those hundreds of thousands who fled Syria. And so the refugee problem is not going to end until there is some justice brought to this terrible situation of discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that excellent presentation and for sharing the personal stories and also examining the Constitution and what is being brought up from history and made current again by the new government. We're now going to shift over to Joel Veldkamp.
Thank you, Abi, and thank you to Professor Balanche and Professor Landis for these sobering but important presentations. At the beginning of this panel, the letter that Abi cited from an anonymous Christian leader in Syria made reference to the prevalence of arbitrary detention in Syria today. I will use my time to highlight one specific case of arbitrary detention, that of a man named Suleiman Khalil. Could we move to the slide? Suleiman Khalil is the former mayor of a town called Saadad in Homs province of Syria. On February 8 of this year, he was arrested at his home in Saadad and taken to prison in Homs city. Since that day, nearly 5 months ago, he has been held without charge, without access to a lawyer, and without being able to communicate with his family. We at Christian Solidarity International have known Suleiman Khalil for several years. He came to our attention because during his tenure as mayor, Saadad was attacked twice by jihadist forces. Saadad is an ancient village where the large majority of residents are Syriac Orthodox Christians. In October 2013, a rebel coalition led by ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra attacked Saadad. The latter organization, we should mention, was al-Qaeda's official affiliate in Syria and was founded by the current president of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara. ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra, and their allies occupied Saadad for 1 week, during which they desecrated the town's churches and killed 41 civilians, including 14 women and 2 children, according to Human Rights Watch. The bodies of an entire family were retrieved from a well after rebel forces withdrew. In November 2015, Saadad came under attack again, this time by the Islamic State. This time, however, the jihadist forces were not able to enter the town. As mayor, Suleiman Khalil successfully organized local defenders to defend the town, and the Islamic State's advance was stopped. It was in Saadad that we met him a year later, when he helped us to organize some small aid and development projects in his town. Suleiman's heroism when Saadad was under assault by the Islamic State greatly enhanced his local popularity. Seeing him as a threat, the Assad regime engineered his removal from office in 2016. I should mention that Suleiman was not a member of the ruling Ba'ath party. He was a member of an opposition party called the Syrian Social Nationalist Party. When the Assad regime was overthrown in December 2024, we sent a message to Suleiman to check on his status. He replied to us with a voice message. He was laughing with joy. "We are very, very happy. About time we got rid of this dictator," he told us. He invited us to come and visit him in a free Syria. For Christians, especially in Syria, Suleiman's detention has a dark meaning. Suleiman, as I said, was not a Ba'ath Party member or supporter. He was not a combatant in the civil war. It is difficult for many Syrian Christians to avoid the conclusion that he is being punished for having had the temerity to organize the defense of a Christian village against the Islamic State in 2015. By releasing Suleiman, the Syrian government would show that its promises of protection and equal rights for Christians and political inclusivity for all Syrians are more than just words. By the same token, the longer he is held, the harder it is to believe in the many promises of the new Syria. For these reasons, and because of our commitment to basic human rights, Christian Solidarity International calls for Suleiman Khalil's immediate and unconditional release. As Abi mentioned at the beginning of our panel, in our own interactions with Syrians, we have noticed a marked decline over the past 2 months in the willingness of Syrians to express themselves on these issues in public, particularly issues related to minority rights. The mood in Syria has shifted. People no longer feel free to speak. That makes it all the more remarkable that the courageous young woman who you are about to meet has decided to speak. I am honored now to share with you today a video of Suleiman's daughter, Natalie, reading a letter that she sent to Mr. Geir Pedersen, the UN Special Envoy for Syria. We'll play that video now. In one moment.
Hello, Mr. Pedersen. This is me, Natalie, and I'm recording this video on behalf of our father, Suleiman Khalil, the former mayor of town of Sadat. On 8 February 2025, armed security officials came to our home in Sadat and they searched our whole house for weapons but found nothing. Nonetheless, they arrested my father and took him away, and we haven't been able to speak to him since then. We understand that he was initially incarcerated in the military secretary section prison of Homs and subsequently transferred to Homs Central Prison. We believe he has now been transferred to a special integration prison in Homs. My father hasn't been charged with any crime. He hasn't been allowed to see any lawyer, and we haven't been allowed to visit him or communicate with him in any way. My dad is a loyal Syrian who was a member in a political party in opposition to the Assad regime as he celebrated the liberation of Syria last December. He is greatly admired in Sadat by people of all religious backgrounds for organizing its defense against Daesh in 2025. He has committed no crime. Mr. Pedersen, we know that working on the release of detainees is a key priority for your office as an essential confidence-building measure. You also said on 26 April 2025, you need to see more inclusiveness on behalf of the government. And I don't need to tell you, Mr. Pedersen, that Syria is in a very fragile state. The violence on Syrian coast, genocide against the Alawites, and against the Druze in the suburbs of Damascus, and the recent bombing of Marlias Church in Damascus. All of these has frayed relations between Syrians from all different political and religious affiliations. And we believe that securing our father's release will demonstrate the new government's commitment to transparency, due process, inclusivity, and equal rights for all Syrians. We urge you to engage directly with President Ahmed al-Shara and ask him for our father's immediate release. And I thank you for your time. Best regards.
We're so grateful to be able to share this video directly with you all and reiterate the plea to heed her words and ask for immediately Suleiman Khalil's release. We're going to shift into our Q&A section for question and answers. And we will, if you want to direct it to a particular panelist, please do so. We're going to try to keep the time of the questions, which will be up on the timer, to under 1 minute each. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ammar Waqqaf. I'm a Syrian Alawite. I work in the UK, director of Gnosos think tank. There's a lot to add, obviously. I will be presenting tomorrow in a sister session in the afternoon on human rights in Syria, but I would like to make this point that everyone is considering the different religion and that the Sunni belief makes the Alawites as apostates is an issue or something. I think the major issue is that it is also coupled with the concept of this is a war zone. And once we realize this, which means that you could basically kill, take booty, take women as slaves as much as you like, and God wouldn't be basically commit any atrocity without God, punishing you, isn't confined to a place like Syria only, but a war zone could be anywhere in the world where Islam isn't governing. So that means this very tiny right-wing, ultra-right-wing group of people, when they are available in any place, like here in Geneva, in the United States, wherever it is, they are allowed by God, by the specific doctrine of Darul Harb, the area of war or house of war, to commit such atrocities with impunity from God, because that's what law is. I thank you very much for this, and I thought I'd just make this addition. Happy to communicate afterwards. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mohammed. I'm the director of Solidarity Advocacy Group. I've been working on minorities over the last 10 years, including Iraq, Syria, and Tunisia, and others. And my question is, I'm really concerned about Ma'lula. We haven't heard so much, any witnesses or any statement of how is Ma'lula with the people there. And the second question is, what do you expect from the UN Special Rapporteur on Minority as an alternative mechanism to protect the identity of the minority that's beginning in Syria, focusing especially on those with a cultural and historical background, like the Christian, Assyrians, and other minority? Thank you so much.
About Ma'lula, the information, it's that Christian people in Ma'lula are very afraid because they are, of course, surrounded by many villages, Sunni villages, people who worked with Daesh, with different jihadist group, and they moved to Lebanon or to Idlib by the past when the Assad regime retook the area after 2014-15, and now they are back. And because it's the same case like Sadat, but does it mean in Sadat the Christian organized a self-defense militia to protect the area against the jihadists? And in Ma'lula, after the massacre in October 2013, they have done the same thing. And now you have the former jihadists who come back to their village and they want to take revenge against the Christian because they fight each other. But of course the new regime take care about Ma'lula because he knows the symbol of Ma'lula for all the Christianity, the village where you speak the language of the crest. So, and because it's not far from Damascus, so you have many journalists and Westerners, they go to Ma'lula. but because you need that for the lifting of the sanction. But now that the sanctions are nearly lifted, you don't need to. So people from Malula are leaving, Christian people of Malula are leaving Malula, moving to Damascus, where they feel that they are more protected, and then probably ask for asylum outside. It's all the Christian community in Syria who are like that. So me, I'm very pessimistic about all the minority in Syria. Of course, Alawite Shia, as told my friend Joshua Landis, are specifically targeted because they are Mu'tadin. And with the new Islamic philosophy who was ruling Syria, it's incompatible. They cannot stay in Syria or they have to convert. It's a white ethnic cleansing. It's not brutal ethnic cleansing like the Armenian genocide, for instance. But it's to push the minority slowly to move outside Syria, because they will not have any promotion in the administration, they will not have any job in the administration. The life will be more and more difficult for them, and they could be killed also when you have such a massacre.
Just to quickly add to your second question, sir, about the UN Special Rapporteur for Minorities, certainly we think this is an extremely urgent case of where minorities need protections, and we do think this rapporteur should engage, make a visit to the country, make a report. We'd be very supportive of such an action and willing to support such an action.
We're going to go first here, and then we'll come back.
My name is Rima, and I'm Syrian too, and I'm aware that there are more than there are several human rights mechanisms that are related to Syria. There is entire team for Syria that is based between Beirut and Damascus. There is a commission of inquiry. And my question is how they are addressing all these violations in their reports. Is there a way to engage with them on these issues? And my second question is to the speakers, to our respected speakers. The usual scenario that we saw in Iraq and in other areas is minorities are targeted and then they leave the country. Do you have, or they are attacked, eliminated? So is there a third scenario that is more optimistic, and how to get there?
Of course, we are in a same way like Iraq, it's clear. And for me, the third scenario, that does it mean the protection of the minority could be possible if instead to have a centralized political system, we will have a federal system in Syria with part of the country ruled directly by the minority, like the de facto situation that we have for the Kurds and for the Druze, where you have a self-protection. If we don't have a federal system in Syria, but a centralized system, I think for the minority is finished.
Hello, I'd like to add.
To hand this also to Joshua Landis online.
I'd like to add to that. Even if there is not a federal system in a very clear way, which the central government has rejected, what is necessary is that political parties should be legalized. And the new constitution, or interim constitution, says that there will be freedom of thought, expression, and political parties. And it announced that there would be a new law for political parties to organize. But that law has not been promulgated yet. This is something that the international community can do, is to pressure the government to allow for political parties. Because once people can organize, Alawites, Druze, others, and in particular, secular or more secular leaning Sunnis who want there to be democracy, in Syria and to pressure the present government for democracy, there has to be political parties, and Syrians have to get organized. Now, that is not going to be something that happens tomorrow, because the Assad regime just destroyed politics in Syria. It's going to take time for people to get organized and make compromises and articulate their thoughts. But it's the only hope for limiting the power of this present government, which is, as I tried to explain, consolidated in the hands of just a very few people at the top. And that pressure for democracy and for elections is something that needs to be maintained. And presently, of course, we've seen President Trump of the United States has said that he does not want to nation build and he doesn't want to micromanage, and that he's not going to be pushing Syria to become democratic. And in fact, the U.S.'s new ambassador to Syria, or special envoy, the ambassador to Turkey, has said that he's not going to be pressing for democracy. And that's something that the European community and the UN can actually do and should do. And it should be to keep up pressure so that there can be political parties, representation, and so that Syrians can organize in order to express their needs, which is not happening today. There are almost no Alawite figures in this present government. They've not been asked for their voice. They've not been given any authority within this new government. And that's something that needs to happen. And it's going to be a difficult process, but it's one that can unfold in the future.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one final question, maybe two, if we can get through them very, very quickly. Gentleman in the back, yes, sir.
حب ترجم ترجمان.
I will translate for myself, if you don't mind.
أنا كردي سوري رئيس المنظمة حقوق إنسان في سوريا ماف.
He's a Kurdish Syrian and a human rights activist in Syria.
26 سنة موجود بسويسرا.
26 years in Switzerland.
الانتهاكات وجرائم عم بوثقوا توثيق الحكومة الجديدة.
He's observing and monitoring the violation of the new regime.
عندنا بسوريا جرائم بيصير.
We have crimes committed in Syria.
والمواقف الدولية يعني لهلا مواقف دولية مع النظام اللي موجود نظام متطرف بسوريا.
And the world community is supporting the current extremist regime.
البشار الأسد كان محافظة حسكة 13 أعضاء برلمان. هلا الحكومة الجديدة حطوا 6 أعضاء برلمان.
During Bashar, they had 13 member parliament in Hasaka, now it's only 6.
ووجه واحد بس يقبلوا، لا كردي يقبل، لا مسيحي، لا علوي.
And they only accept one face, no Kurdish, no Alawi, no Christian.
وهلا عم يقتلوا العلويين على الهوية.
And now they are targeting Alawis based on their identity.
وشكرا على الجلسة.
Thank you for your time and your session.
Great. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for right now. As you are leaving, if you didn't pick one up in the way in, there are fact sheets, information sheets about Suleiman Khalil, the mayor that Joel spoke about and that we heard from his daughter. If you want to connect with CSI, we would be glad to talk with you more afterwards, and we really appreciate your attention here today and your placing the importance on this matter. Thank you. Good morning.